You are listening to the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast,
where we talk about fine food and healthy living throughout Asia.
So let's get started. Hey everybody, Ian and Todd here.
Welcome to the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast.
If this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. The Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast is produced every week for your enjoyment, and show notes are found on our Facebook page.
Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram or on my blog, toddinasia.com. That's Todd with two D's in Asia.com.
All links are in the show notes. Now, let's get started. Welcome to this week's podcast. Today we have a very special guest, a chef and owner and philanthropist, Ryan Clift, and with me is also my co-host, Todd. Welcome to the show, Ryan. Thanks for coming.
A pleasure to be here, mate.
Ryan is the owner of the Tippling Club. A little bit of backstory with the Tippling Club. It's a highly decorated restaurant. Since 2014, they've had 21 awards, 4 times in the Asia's 50 best restaurants, twice in Asia's 50 best bars, and last year, 2017, world's best restaurant bar. So it's an amazing bit of history, amazing place to be. One of the quotes that I found on a website, Ryan said, "They serve food that is technically accomplished and unimpeachably daring." Chef Ryan Clift and cocktail maestro Joe Schofield have masterminded one of Singapore's coolest venues. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Ryan. You've got an interesting story. You started chefing at a very young age, 14.
Well, actually 13. I grew up in a small town called Devizes in England, in the West Country, near Stonehenge, around that area. And at a very, very early age, I realised I wasn't a very academic person. I was starting to get myself into a lot of trouble.
Right.
And I was a bit of a hooligan. Right. And school really wasn't for me. And so I decided that I didn't want to go to school anymore. And literally, Mum said, well, you need to get a job. And luckily, I walked past a restaurant one afternoon. I saw a sign saying help needed. I went in, literally within 10 seconds, I'm on the pots washing the dishes. And, a few months down the track, discovered that it was a Michelin-star restaurant. And,
without knowing it.
Without knowing. I didn't even know what a Michelin-star was back then. And after a few months, the chef gave me a jacket, and I moved on to one of the sections. And so really very fortunate to find something at such a young age.
Yeah.
But the moment I put on that jacket, something clicked in my head, something changed. Immediately attracted to the pace, the adrenaline, the pressure, the stress, the violence, the aggression, everything that what used to be in the old days, what I call the old days of kitchens, especially in England. And almost the military precision of everything. And I was a young boy that was very undisciplined, very against everything to do with discipline. And, I couldn't be told. Luckily, cooking, something clicked in my head, and I loved it. I loved the regimentation of the kitchen and organisation.
So it sounds like it almost saved.
No, it did. It saved me. I've got a lot of mates in prison. I've got a lot of mates that aren't with us anymore because of the line of childhood we were going down, unfortunately. And I actually think cooking, really pulled me out and saved me in a way. I really owe my life to gastronomy and cooking. Yeah. And, I've dedicated the last 28 years to my trade. This year, I think, is my 28th year of professionally cooking. I've already done a life's work, I suppose, and I've still got another 20 years in me. And for me, cooking is something that you can express yourself very easily through food. If people want to look at my food, they think I'm a nut job, sometimes. But, for me, I love the artistry that goes with it, but for me, it's more the science behind it.
You must have gotten a fair bit of inspiration and tutelage as well from some of the chefs you've worked with.
Yeah.
People like Peter Gordon, Marco White, Shannon Bennett, Raymond Capaldi. They must have given you some inspiration as to where to go.
I was fortunate enough to work in some of the best restaurants in Europe. And again, at such a young age, it was challenging. I was always the youngest in the kitchen, so I was always the one that gets picked on first, I suppose. But I suppose it toughens you up.
Yeah.
Gives you a bit of a thicker skin. And really, I suppose every chef I've ever worked with, I've taken something away from each experience. But really, it was when I moved to France and worked for Emmanuel Renault at Flocon-Sel in Megève, and then to Marc Vera in Nancy. It's really started understanding the science of cooking, and that's really become my passion now. I mean, you see at Tippling Club, we have a full lab set up on the second floor, which is my R&D kitchen, my development kitchen. We have a team of 3 R&D chefs at work 3 days a week in my lab with me, developing the new food for Tippling, essentially. So everything that's created is created upstairs. It's tested out, it's tried, it's recorded, it's photographed, the tableware's made for it, the cutlery's made for it. Everything before it goes downstairs is tried and tested. It's not something that we just habdashedly slap together. It's, it takes us about 3 months to develop a dish, and there's a very lengthy process behind it. But the end result is something that's unique. If we believe we've seen it or something similar in a magazine or in a book, we scrap it, we start again. Everything that's served in this restaurant is purely from my head and my head only.
Yeah, well, your cocktails are a prime example of that, not just the food.
So I'm very fortunate. I mean, Tippling Club's always been in the sort of public eye for our creativity behind our drinks, and not just for our food, but especially with our drinks. And I'm very fortunate to have Joe Schofield working with me. Me and him have exactly the same thought process in terms of creativity. And, when he first started with me years ago, he came from the Savoy in London, and he asked me, what do you want from me? What's my first role as head bartender? And I said, well, we need to work on a new menu. You need to have ownership, and you need to work on a new menu. I said, I've got a few ideas that I'm developing. And I said, you show me yours, I'll show you mine.
Yeah.
and he did, and his ideas were exactly the same as mine. We wanted to work on aromatized menus, perfumes, so on and so forth. And I'm very fortunate that I work quite closely with a company called IFF, International Flavors and Fragrances. I've been working with them for about 8 years, so very much so in the perfume world. So we actually have access to some of the world's best perfumers, some of the best flavor scientists. So when we're developing this stuff, it's not slapdash, it is really on the top level.
And it's not just wine pairing, you're pairing cocktails with your meals, everything.
Yeah, and that's what Tippling Club sort of became famous for. We're not, I call it fine dining without the snobbery. There's an element of fun to what we do, but it's serious fun.
Yeah.
It can be a bit tongue-in-cheek, it can be a slight humor, it can be, a confusional state. Like, we try to have every element in the meal. Take people out of their comfort zone, but then bring them back home to a hug from their mother, or, it's a journey. When you eat at Tippling Club, our tasting menu downstairs is currently sitting at about 32 courses. Wow. So it's an experience. It's about 3 hours.
Wow, 3 hours.
Yeah. But we don't turn tables. We're only a 32-seat restaurant. And for those 32 seats, we have about 32 staff. It's very organised, yeah. So
having a look at your cocktail list, it's quite interesting. You've got gummy bears. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, last year was the first aromatised menu, and that was based on memories. So it was 12 fragrant sticks that were smelled by the customer, that evokes a memory, and they order their drink based on their smell and a memory, okay? But we did things that were fun to us. So, for example, I love the smell of rain. So one of the sticks smelled of rain, one smelled of baby perfume, like so on and so forth, like all these different memories. And it was a success. It won us world's best restaurant cocktail bar, Tales of the Cocktail last year. But we've said to ourselves, every year we have to launch a new menu for the bar. So this menu will last about 10 to 11 months. But it takes 10 to 11 months to actually develop the next menu. So literally, we've already started. We've just launched the gummy bear menu, and this one is based on dreams and desires. So we've created 12 gummy bears in conjunction with IFF. We make the gummy bears here ourselves. We went to their confectionery laboratory. We spent weeks with them learning how to make them, the special molds, the techniques, the special agents that we need to set them correctly, as you would in a factory situation. We learned them. We then developed the flavors that go into the gummy bears, and that's what we've launched now. So this is dreams and desires. So on there you have a gummy bear that tastes of lust, holiday, supercar, knowledge, power, revenge. Each one is very unique in flavor.
The supercar one, it says butter, white wine, citrus, petrol, and gin.
Petrol, yeah. So actually, we discovered that there's a compound in racing fuel for cars that is exactly the same DNA as white truffle oil. It's the same ingredient that they use to flavor white truffle oil.
Yeah.
Is actually found in racing fuel.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's a fun thing about working with companies like IFF. We have access to so much information when it comes to flavor technology. So it's super fun. So the idea for this one is every customer that sits in our bar gets handed a little confectionery bag with the 12 gummy bears inside. We actually work with a neurologist, flavor scientists, color scientists, and basically we've discovered that 85% of people immediately go for their first dream or desire. So it might be a woman that wants a baby. Obviously, she's going to go for baby first. It might be a man, he's in a bad mood, he wants revenge, or he wants to look posh, he goes for knowledge. So most people, within the first 2 gummy bears, order their cocktail.
Is it sometimes a matter of how they're feeling on the day?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And that's something we've discovered with working with the neurologist, that it's actually affected by mood. So we've actually worked with the colour scientist then. We changed the colours of those to not associate what you should actually think you would associate that colour with that word. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. A lot of work.
Yeah.
Goes into
I mean, look, I'm looking at the list here. There's beauty, which has makeup, jasmine, dry sherry, I should say, and champagne. Fantastic combination. The makeup's another interesting ingredient.
Yeah. So the makeup is actually the flavour of lipstick.
Right.
So it's actually, it adds a depth of flavour. It's very bizarre.
Yeah.
Obviously all food grade. But the funny thing is, we've just launched this. Obviously, if you go to our website, there's the actual making of the video as well, which is super cool.
Actually, something Todd was going to ask, your website videos, yes. Who does those? They're fantastic.
So I use a guy called Ed Charles from Cedar Films in London. He's a friend of a friend. He does a lot of short videos for restaurants in London. And as a favour to me, just for a cheap economy flight, it's a one-man operation. He flies over, spends 3 days with us. We film one of those in a whole day. That's it. It's 1 day and it's done. And it takes him about 2 days to edit it, and we get it back. The guy's an absolute genius. So, yeah, Ed from Cedar Films. And we have a laugh when he's here as well, so we take him out for dinner. And that's it.
Yeah.
It's really, really good operation.
Why Singapore? What made you move here? What was the motivation?
Well, I moved to Australia in 98, 99, and working there for many, many years. And then it got to a point where I realised I was the chef de cuisine in the most famous restaurant in Australia, Vue de Monde. I took it to 3 hats, first time to get 3 hats in Australia, in Melbourne. I built that restaurant from a team of 4 chefs, and when I left there was 38 of us in the kitchen. It was a machine. It was an absolute machine. But the last few years of Vue de Monde, really, my job was just developing all the new dishes, and that's something that's become sort of my way of doing it. I don't necessarily cook so much anymore. Yeah. I'm in the kitchen for service. I plate the food. I see everything go out. My role is now about development, and I realised that I'd reached a level in my career where I wasn't going to really learn anything else. Not sounding arrogant.
No, that's fair enough. You wanted to challenge yourself.
I wasn't challenged anymore, and then I realised, no, now's the time to open your own restaurant. I wasn't maybe the wisest businessman when I opened my first restaurant, but you learn that as you go. I mean, chefs are chefs. Chefs are notoriously bad with money, women, and lots of other things. But I took the punt, so I started putting feelers out. And at that time, my ex-business partner, who was Matthew Bax, he was instrumental in setting up the Tippling Club with me in 2008. He got invited to Singapore to do a bit of consultancy work for someone, and when he came back, he mentioned that he told them that me and him wanted to do a restaurant together. We already had the Tippling Club concept sort of on paper. We'd been working together. We were actually looking to originally do it in Melbourne.
Okay.
But we couldn't actually find anyone to invest. We didn't have enough money. And then we met a lady called Cynthia Chua, who owns the Spa Esprit Group here in Singapore. Yes. A multi big company, mostly focusing on beauty, but she has a lot of restaurant outlets now. And she wanted to get into F&B. So she wanted to dabble her feet in F&B. I mean, she's one of the most successful beauty brands in Asia. And asked us if we'd come over and do some more consultancy for her on a cafe. We did. And for the payment of that, she invested in the Tippling Club.
Fantastic.
But the deal was it had to be in Singapore. So we thought, well, why not? Change the scenery, change the market. We came over, we did a bit of market research, and We looked around, and it was either hawker or high end. There was nothing in between. There was no real cocktail bar scene. There was no one cooking anything remotely progressive. It was classic French, classic Italian, or sort of high-end Chinese, I suppose. So we took a punt and we opened in Dempsey August 2008, and immediately within our first 6 months we're being flown around the world to present at Harvard University, Oxford, Bristol University, Madrid Fusion. We were the first restaurant from Singapore to be invited up on stage with the likes of Ferran Adria, Anthony Luis from Mugaritz, and all of a sudden it just exploded. It just exploded. But still, I remember back to when we first opened, and customers would come to the bar and they'd sit down and they'd order a martini, and then they'd spit it out and say it was too strong. They'd ask for sugar syrup on the side or to sweeten it. Like the level of knowledge of drinks in this country was mind-boggling, because we just, they'd order a Sazerac. It says it's bourbon, absinthe, this, and they'd drink. It's too strong. So we ordered a Sazerac. You walk into a cocktail bar in America and order one of those, it's even stronger.
Yeah. No, I was going to say nobody in Australia would complain if it was too strong.
No. So we really had to stick to our guns for the first few years as well, because also, although we exploded, we were more famous in bloody England than we were in Singapore. Everyone was labeling us as molecular, and the food's weird, and the drink's too strong, and
You've carved your own niche.
Yeah, but we honestly, in the first 3-4 years, I nearly closed the restaurant about 4 times, but just purely because we weren't busy enough, or I was almost frustrated to some degree with the level of understanding of gastronomy in this country. But then all of a sudden, I don't know, I think something really changed in Singapore. The tourism board got very much behind like high-end gastronomy. Likes of Andre Chang, Julien Royer, all these guys started appearing in Singapore, and all of a sudden my food wasn't so weird anymore.
Yeah.
It started becoming a bit more normal, and the more chefs that have come, the bigger the sort of the talent pools become. Of course, it makes the competition harder, but I don't like sitting on my ass and doing nothing. So it's healthy to have good competition, and some amazingly talented chefs in Singapore. But as that's happened, the understanding of gastronomy's changed. People get it now. They're very quick to understand it now, And now, it's nice to be referred to as like the pioneers of the cocktail culture in Singapore, which we've been referred to many times for this. We really did bring modern mixology to Singapore. And now 10 years on, we're an institution. And that's something that I'm really proud about. To look back at when we started to now, I never thought I'd last this long in Singapore. So it's good. We're having fun.
Todd, have you got any questions to ask, Ryan?
Yeah, well, first I'll just say I'm joining in on WhatsApp this week from Malaysia while Ian's over there in Singapore, and I wanted to let Chef Ryan know I'm just blown away by what you're doing. You're really pushing the envelope when it comes to gastronomy, and you're throwing in neurology and artistry and really thinking outside the box in so many ways. It's just very inspiring.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your logo? I'm interested what that means.
The logo is actually, without a piece of paper, without you being able to see it, it's hard to explain. The logo is actually my thought process. A lot of people think it's a fishbone, but it's not. The flat line is a timeline. When I create a dish in my test kitchen upstairs, we start with one ingredient. As you'll see on my menus downstairs, everything on the menu starts with just one ingredient. So for example, foie gras. For example, I love my foie gras. We then draw a straight line. This is my timeline. Then each line that is drawn down represents each ingredient that I can find that will work with foie gras. Now this process takes about, on average, a month to a month and a half to exhaust every avenue. Sometimes we get up to 3,000, 4,000 ingredients that we can find via internet, books, research, history, that we can find that will work. Once we find the ingredient, we then draw the line down. At the bottom of that ingredient, for example, apple, we write every technique that we can apply to just apple. So for example, it's always start with fresh, then dehydrated, baked, stewed, boiled, pureed, nitrogen powder, sorbet, pickled, yeah, exactly. We list every single technique. We then apply that to every single ingredient we can find on the lines. We stand back, we've now created a mind map of every technique and every ingredient that we can apply to just foie gras, because foie gras will be the star of the dish.
Sure.
Okay? Then we circle which ingredients we want to use. We then do a separate menu bar, a separate line for those ingredients to make sure that they work together as well. Because they might work with foie gras, but you put plum and potato together, it's a bit, maybe doesn't work that well,
Yeah.
So then we do a separate one to that to whittle it down to all the ones that we find will work. Then we circle the techniques we want to apply to those ingredients, and only then do I then give those recipes to my guys, and they create those individual components, which are then tasted individually without being on a plate. I don't like to, for me, sight is irrelevant in food. Yeah, okay, my food, if you go to my website, looks pretty, but that's how it looks.
It's more about the taste.
For me, it's purely about taste, texture, temperature, smell. Sight always last, okay? So then once we've got all the components together and I'm happy with the mouthfeel, the flavor, the temperature, maybe we need to add a hot element, maybe we need to add a super cold element, maybe I can't smell it enough and I want it to smell more, so then do we need to go and sit with IFF, develop a fragrance, so there's a lot that goes into it. And then and only then, we then start putting it on the plate. So it's a lengthy process, but that drawing, that menu bar, that chain of thought process became my logo. And it's something that I've developed myself.
It's a great logo because it incorporates what the restaurant is about.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fantastic. Todd, do you have any other questions that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, just one more quick question for now. What is a sonifier?
A sonifier. So, yeah, in my lab, in my test kitchen, we've got some pretty wacky equipment. A sonifier. So a sonifier was developed by the petroleum industries to blend non-oil-based chemicals into petrol. And what I discovered was you can do the same thing with liquids. Basically, if you take water and oil in 50-50 ratio, you blend it together, what happens? It splits. It splits, okay? Then if you want it to emulsify, you need to add a mustard or a stabilizing agent like xanthan gum or guar gum or a different hydrocolloid base to bring the two together. But you're now using other ingredients. If I want something to be more natural, I put it in the sonifier, I blend the oil and the liquid base together using super high frequency sound waves. We actually shatter the molecules of the water with the oil, and we actually bind them together using high pressure sound to make an emulsion that is now stable and won't split. And that's how they put chemicals into petrol to boost performance. The chemicals they use are not oil-based, they're water-based. But how do you put water into oil and not be present in the machine? So that's how they do it. So we use it to make stable emulsions, but something that the sonifier does that's also really, really cool, we can age liquids. Now, the concept of aging is over time and oxygen. So by putting, so for example, a Negroni, we make a simple Negroni cocktail. It's very trendy in the bar industry to put cocktails in barrels, or they bottle the cocktails and they leave them for a year and they say it's an aged cocktail. I think that's a load of fluff, to be honest. So what we do is we take our Negroni, we put it into the sonic, we call it the sonic prep, a sonifier. We hit it for about 6 minutes at the highest sound frequency possible. And as the sound is passing through the liquid, you can see these microscopic white bubbles opening and collapsing. And that's actually applying oxygen and sound to the liquid, which is opening and collapsing the cells of the liquid, which is what happens when something ages. It just happens a lot slower. So we speed it up. So in 6 minutes, we can add the equivalent of about 15 years worth of aging.
15 years?
Yeah, it's insane. So actually, a really funny test we've done as well, and we know for a fact they're using this in the alcohol and wine industry, which is quite scary when you know the sort of legalities behind it. We actually get really crap table wine, a really cheap Shiraz or Pinot. put it in the sonic prep, and in about 3 minutes, it tastes like it's been aged for about 20 years.
Oh, you're kidding me.
It's got a rounded flavour.
So you could get something like in Australia, we call it goon juice, where you get the 4-litre cask.
In the cask, You pop that in there, it's going to start tasting like a Haut Briand or a Lafitte Mouton Rothschild pretty quickly. It's actually, there's a very famous case recently of an Indonesian man that got caught selling replica wine. And that was one of the techniques he was applying to the wines.
Because it's something that I suppose the wine industry would be a bit scared about.
They're also quite quiet about it.
Yeah.
If you question certain companies.
I bet. One of the other things that we're fascinated with is your philanthropy.
Yep.
You actually have a charitable organisation that you've been raising money with.
Yeah, lots of money. Millions of dollars over the years. Well, it was by accident that I discovered this charity. I was actually filming a TV show for National Geographic, and we were traveling through India, and the whole ethos of the show was I had to learn Mughal cuisine, the original Indian, okay? And so we started in Delhi, and I went to Dampak, Bukhara, all these restaurants to work with the best Indian chefs to learn the techniques of how they cook. Then from Delhi, we were driving to Jodhpur, and in between Jodhpur is Jaipur. We were driving, and it's a 12-hour drive to Jaipur, through the desert, into Rajasthan, stunning country, but so arid. And we stopped off at the hotel, which was kind of in the middle of the desert, and 2 cameramen got a little bit drunk and decided to take one of the cars for a spin. The show was actually sponsored by Hyundai. And we were literally sitting in the swimming pool, and we watched one of these cars go up the side of a sand dune and just vanish. And they never came back. And then we realized that they've crashed, they rolled the car.
Yeah.
So we got stuck in Jaipur for about 4 days waiting for the next car to be delivered from Delhi. And whilst that happened, we discovered this small charity called iIndia. And it's a family called the Goswami family. He was one of the biggest barristers or lawyers in Delhi. His wife was a Bollywood actress. His 2 sons were studying in Hollywood for films. Very wealthy family. They gave everything up just to cook for the homeless children in their hometown. And they were really struggling when I met them. They started off cooking for about 30, 40 kids. Then within the first month, it went to about 1,000. Then it went to about 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. There's so many homeless children in India, it's not funny. And when I went, I found out that my now ex-wife was pregnant. So seeing all these kids really struck a chord, realizing how lucky my kids were going to be growing up.
Yeah.
They didn't have to experience that. So I promised the Goswamis that when I got back to Singapore, I was going to start raising money for them here. And so every year I do a guest dinner here in Singapore to raise money, and we've raised millions of dollars over the years now. So we've actually built schools, we've built workshops, we've bought buses to deliver the food, we've bought an ambulance, we have a doctor that donates his time twice a week to go and health check all the children, because unfortunately most of them are getting messed around with by the adults in the town. So we have counselling for them, and then each one of those children has to do a mandatory 1 hour of mathematics and English. And then if they tick all the boxes, we feed them. Then twice a week, we take a big old water tanker down. We shower them off the water tanker.
Yeah.
Give them soap, toothpaste, and just see how it changes these kids. It's a really rewarding thing. And again, we've just built a workshop where we're teaching the girls how to make jewelry. We then give them a donation of the materials to build the jewelry, so they can then sell it, so they can be sustainable and they can make their own money. And it's a very, very rewarding project.
It's great that you're also essentially giving them trades.
Correct.
Yeah,
that's the whole idea.
That's something. It's one thing to feed somebody and clothe somebody, but unless you can teach them to be able to look after themselves.
Yeah, and also educate them.
Yeah,
that's the main thing as well. So
it's
a very rewarding project.
We've got Sally here, who's the sommelier for the Tippling Club. Some of the things for people that love food and going out, the professions in the restaurant industry, not everybody knows or understands. Tell us a little about what it is to be a sommelier.
It's an absolute crock.
I love it.
No, it really is. It's such a luxury to be able to call yourself something that really in turn just means that you're advising people on what to drink, because that's a decision that can be easily made without the purpose of someone with a title or wearing great badges. However, from a business perspective and from an engagement and enjoyment perspective, it is really quite important. And it is a luxury in a restaurant. So for myself, I'm sommelier. When we have guests in the dining room, I work the floor as a sommelier. But in saying that, my job doesn't just stop there. It's not as though I suffer from sommelier's disease and I don't clear plates and I don't, talk about food. It's a thing, and you know, you kind of often associate that with. Please, this isn't to diss anyone who's French, but it often means, you know, you work in a Michelin-star restaurant and you wear a suit and.
That is not always the case.
That's just what you do, and you don't do anything else but talk about wine, and you spend every waking moment studying wine, whereas as much as that is important for me as a sommelier, I do that because I'm interested in it personally, and obviously it does help in what I do, but
you're also a maitre d' as well.
Exactly, I'm a maitre d', I'm a restaurant manager, I'm a glass polisher. Wine Options is a game developed by Len Evans of Australian wine history fame, and essentially it's giving you different options regarding the wine. So you'll be served a wine blind, which means you have no idea what the wine is, and then you go through a series of is it A, B or C? So Old World, New World typically is the first question. Old World being sort of France, Italy, Spain, and the like. New World being Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, South America.
You almost get to be a master of wines, because that's what masters of wines can do. They can pick the regions.
They can do that. They can, because they've tasted so widely, and that's all they've done for their entire life, is just taste wine. But it is the best way to learn, and it's also the best way, I feel, to travel, because you don't have to actually get on a flight and be like Ryan all over the world.
Thanks again, guys.
Cheers, mate. Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
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 If you're enjoying the Fine Food and Healthy Living Asia podcast, please consider supporting us by going to our homepage at www.finefoodandhealthylivingasia.com and making a donation.
We are beginning a new way to support the show by subscribing as a loyal member. Another option on our homepage at finefoodandhealthylivingasia.com. There are options to choose for the level of support you wish to give.
We will always make our podcasts available for free and appreciate your patronage to be able to do so.
If you subscribe with iTunes, please remember to give us a 5-star rating. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so and then give us a 5-star rating. For other subscribers on Google Play, Spotify, or any other aggregators, please rate us there. Once again, thank you for listening to the show.